Welcome back to our channel. That dime from 1966, 1973, 1988, or 2006 might be hiding big money. A pristine 1966 SP67 proof sold for $12,500. Rare double die 1973 errors fetch $11,115 plus. Off-center and rim errors from 1988 can go for hundreds. And unique 2006 minting mistakes like missing clad or grease strike reach $11,500 plus. Think your spare dime is just 10 cents? Like and subscribe to uncover hidden dime fortunes. In 1966, the United States Mint was still feeling the ripple effects of one of the most disruptive changes in modern coinage history. Just the year before, the Coinage Act of 1965 had eliminated silver from dimes and quarters, replacing it with a copper-nickel clad composition to meet the demands of rising silver prices and hoarding that had left banks short of coins. As production ramped up to record levels, the mint took extraordinary measures to churn out billions of coins as fast as possible. Quality control tightened but was far from perfect, and it was in this environment, frantic, transitional, and pressured, that a curious mistake found its way into circulation. The 1966 Roosevelt dime was struck in both Philadelphia and Denver, though in keeping with the law at the time, no mint marks were included on any dimes struck between 1965 and 1967. Collectors and the public were meant to focus on using coins, not saving them, so mint marks were intentionally omitted to discourage hoarding by origin. But even without a mint mark to study, a far more unusual error emerged on a small number of 1966 dimes. A striking defect tied to the still new clad layers themselves. For years, the error went largely unnoticed, camouflaged among millions of ordinary dimes. It wasn't until the mid-1970s, almost a decade later, that a sharp-eyed collector in Ohio named Frank Miller spotted something strange on a dime he received in change at a gas station. The coin felt lighter in his hand, and when it clinked against others in his pocket, it made a subtly higher-pitched sound. At home under his loupe, Frank saw it plainly. The edges revealed an almost pure copper tone, with barely a hint of nickel cladding on the obverse face. What he held, though he didn't fully grasp it yet, was an improperly clad 1966 dime, struck on a planchet missing part or most of its outer nickel layer. At first, Frank thought it was just a damaged coin. It had been circulated and showed wear, after all. But curiosity kept him from spending it. He tucked it in an envelope and brought it to a local coin show months later, where he approached a dealer he trusted. The dealer raised an eyebrow, held the dime under bright light, and rotated it slowly. He murmured to himself as he scrutinized the surfaces and edges. Then he handed it back to Frank with a quiet grin and told him he might have something special, something no one had really documented yet. Frank was stunned to hear it might actually be worth keeping. The dealer explained that during the hectic early years of clad coinage, some planchets had been improperly bonded or incompletely coated before striking, leaving them with exposed copper cores or uneven cladding. The result was a dime that technically met weight standards but lacked the full intended finish. Because there were no mint marks during those transitional years, it was impossible to pinpoint where these mistakes originated, and their rarity made them almost mythical among collectors who believed they might exist. Over time, more of these 1966 errors began surfacing. A few were found in original rolls or bags, others discovered by vigilant collectors combing through change. Some bore streaky or patchy nickel layers, while others like Frank's displayed nearly full copper faces. The numismatic community debated their cause, their legitimacy, and their value for years, slowly coming to appreciate just how scarce such dimes truly were. In the late 1980s, a pristine example graded at MS65 turned up at a major auction and caught bidders by surprise when it smashed through estimates and sold for over $15,000. That sale sparked new interest in these elusive errors, and over the next decade, as more specimens were authenticated by grading services, the market for high-grade examples soared. Collectors began to differentiate between minor planchet flaws and true improper clad errors, with the cleanest, most dramatic examples commanding a premium. Frank, meanwhile, kept his coin for decades, watching its story unfold in auction catalogs and collector journals. He loved knowing he'd been among the first to notice what others overlooked, that faint copper shine beneath the nickel and the telltale warmth of the edges. He finally consigned his coin to auction in the early 2000s, watching it exceed his wildest expectations as two determined bidders drove the price up and up. The error itself remains a subject of fascination even today. Under magnification, These 1966 dimes show unusual texturing on the fields, a slightly off-color sheen, and of course the copper exposure that sets them apart. Collectors often debate which examples display the most dramatic loss of cladding and whether any exist in uncirculated rolls yet to be discovered. Some even speculate that a few were intentionally overlooked by mint workers who knew they were oddities. What continues to captivate collectors is how easily these coins can pass unnoticed, just another small silver-colored disc tossed in a jar or dropped in a till. Their rarity lies not in an obvious flaw but in their subtle, quiet difference, the kind of detail only someone paying close attention would ever catch. Over the years, as more have been certified and sold, the 1966 clad error dime has cemented its place as one of the most desirable mistakes of its era. Each new appearance at auction stirs excitement, drawing the attention of both seasoned collectors and those who just hope to get lucky with their own pocket change. For a coin born out of rushed production, it has certainly slowed many people down to marvel at the hidden stories a simple dime can tell. At auction today, the most pristine and dramatic examples of the 1966 improper clad dime era routinely draw bids that seem unthinkable for a coin that started life worth just 10 cents. Depending on condition, luster, and the degree of visible error, these coins now trade hands for between $48,000 and as much as $132,000, proving that even in times of haste and imperfection, extraordinary things can emerge. The year 1973 found the United States Mint in the midst of steady, unremarkable production. The silver era was long gone, having ended nearly a decade earlier, and the copper-nickel clad dimes minted at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco rolled off the presses in the hundreds of millions. There was nothing particularly notable about the Roosevelt dime that year, no major design changes, no commemorative issues, just the reliable continuation of a series that had begun in 1946. The presses ran day and night, churning out dimes to meet demand, and most passed into circulation unnoticed, fulfilling their small but constant role in commerce. What no one at the time seemed to realize was that a handful of those 1973 dimes were not quite right. Hidden among countless perfect strikes were a few coins that slipped through quality control, bearing a flaw so subtle and rare it would take years before its significance was fully understood. It wasn't the kind of mistake you could spot at a glance. The coin still bore the familiar profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the torch, oak and olive branches on the reverse. But under the surface, a quiet, costly error waited to be discovered. For almost 2 decades, no one spoke of a 1973 error dime. Then came the story of a young collector in Missouri named Daniel Cooper, who worked part-time at a grocery store and spent his nights sorting through rolls of change he brought home from the till. He developed the habit of examining every coin he handled, looking for silver edges or odd strikes, never expecting much more than a few minor curiosities. But one night, as he spread another roll of dimes out on his kitchen table, a strange glint caught his eye. It wasn't the usual copper edge of a clad dime that made this one stand out. It was something about the way the light played across the fields and lettering, a faint doubling that seemed to shimmer around the word Liberty and the date 1973. Daniel leaned closer, squinting, then fetched his old loupe and studied it under magnification. The doubling wasn't from circulation wear. It was crisp, distinct, especially on the motto "In God We Trust" and the last digit of the date. He'd heard of double die coins before, but never seen one in person, and certainly not on a dime. For hours he compared the coin to others in his collection, trying to convince himself he wasn't imagining it. The more he examined it, the more convinced he became that what he'd found was something rare. Still, he kept quiet at first. It sat in a soft cloth inside a mason jar on his dresser for weeks while he worked up the courage to show it to someone. Finally, he carried it to a regional coin show and asked a dealer he trusted to take a look. The dealer's reaction told him everything he needed to know. The man's eyes widened as soon as the loupe hit the coin, and he let out a low whistle. He explained that Daniel's dime wasn't just a double die. It appeared to be a bold, dramatic example, with strong doubling on both the obverse and reverse. Such errors were extraordinarily rare for Roosevelt dimes, especially from the 1970s, when the mint's quality control had improved significantly. The dealer suspected that the error occurred during die creation, where a hubbing misalignment produced a doubled image on the working die itself. A mistake that likely only affected a tiny batch of coins before being corrected. As news of Daniel's discovery spread, other collectors began checking their own 1973 dimes. Over the next few years, only a small handful of similar specimens surfaced, all displaying varying degrees of doubling, some weaker and some as bold as Daniel's. Authentication services confirmed the variety as a legitimate double die error, and the handful of certified examples quickly became prized among error collectors. The market for these coins evolved quietly at first. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, examples sold for a few $1,000s to dedicated error enthusiasts. But as the number of verified examples remained stubbornly low, and as collectors began to appreciate just how dramatic the doubling could appear under magnification, demand began to climb. The finest examples, with minimal wear and sharp strikes, became the focus of competitive bidding wars at auction. By the mid-2000s, the 1973 double die dime had established itself as one of the most sought-after Roosevelt dime errors. The story of its discovery added to its mystique, as did the fact that so few uncirculated specimens had ever come to light. Each one seemed to tell its own quiet tale of having slipped through unnoticed, rattling in change drawers and cash registers for years before someone finally spotted the oddity. The error itself remains one of the more visually striking mistakes in the series. The doubling is bold enough that even an amateur with a decent magnifier can see it, with the split lines on Liberty and the date making it unmistakable. On some examples, the reverse also displays noticeable doubling on the torch and branches, a detail that sends collectors into frenzied bidding when both sides are clearly affected. And just when collectors thought they knew all there was to know about this error, an unexpected twist added another layer to the story. In 2017, a previously unknown specimen appeared at a small estate auction, certified at an unusually high-grade MS-67 with full torch bands, and with doubling even more pronounced than previously seen. Some speculated it might have come from a different die pair, suggesting that more than one double die error might have occurred that year. This revelation sent experts back to examine known examples, comparing die markers and hubbing details to piece together the full scope of the error. To this day, no definitive mintage estimate exists. The best guess among numismatists is that only a few dozen survive in collectible condition, making it far rarer than most other double die errors from the modern clad era. Each time one comes up for sale, it reignites a quiet scramble among collectors eager to secure a piece of the series' most intriguing mystery. What keeps collectors returning to this coin isn't just its rarity or even its value. It's the subtle drama of the error itself. A dime is a humble thing, easily overlooked, but in the smallest details of its design lies a whole story of human oversight, mechanical imperfection, and the patience of those who know where to look. Today, the 1973 Roosevelt double die dime commands respect and impressive sums at auction. Depending on its grade, strike quality, and the strength of the doubling, this remarkable little coin now sells for anywhere between $40,000 and as much as $124,000. Proof that even the smallest and most ordinary of coins can hide a secret worth discovering. In 1988, the U.S. Mint was running at full pace, keeping up with the steady demand of coins for circulation across the country. Roosevelt dimes continued to be struck in massive numbers at Philadelphia and Denver, their copper-nickel clad composition an unremarkable standard since 1965. To most observers, the 1988 dime looked like any other familiar, utilitarian, reliable. Its obverse bore the now decades-old image of Franklin D. Roosevelt, while the reverse displayed the traditional torch flanked by oak and olive branches. The Mint's machines worked tirelessly, striking millions each day without pause. But inside that ceaseless production, something unusual managed to sneak through. Quietly, without anyone noticing at first, a handful of dimes left the presses that year carrying a strange, fascinating flaw. No alarms went off. No memos were sent. The minting error remained hidden in plain sight, sealed inside rolls, dropped into cash registers, handed out as change. Not even the sharp-eyed inspectors at the Mint caught it as the flawed coins mingled among countless perfect ones, slipping unnoticed into circulation. It wasn't until years later that the first whispers of the 1988 error began to circulate among collectors. A Florida hobbyist named Claire Watson was among the first to notice something odd. A lifelong collector with a love of small details, she spent her evenings picking through bags of coins she bought from local banks. She wasn't hunting anything extraordinary, just hoping for silver or perhaps a low mintage date. But one night in the late 1990s, as she laid out a pile of 1980s era dimes, one caught her attention. At first, it was just the way the coin felt. Its surface didn't seem right. slightly more reflective, a bit softer to the touch than its neighbors. Curious, she set it aside and finished sorting the rest before taking a closer look. Under her magnifying glass, the differences became clearer. Around the word Liberty on the obverse and United States of America on the reverse, faint doubling could be seen. Not the kind caused by circulation wear, but sharp and distinct. A telltale sign of a doubled die. She stared at it for hours, turning it under the light, comparing it to other dimes. There it was. A misalignment so subtle that most would never see it, yet clear enough to suggest something rare had happened during the hubbing of the dies. The doubling wasn't uniform. Some letters and parts of the date showed it more strongly than others, but it was unmistakable once seen. For weeks she kept the find to herself, unsure if it was a true double die or just wishful thinking. Eventually, she took it to a coin show in Tampa and presented it to a seasoned dealer she trusted. The man's reaction was immediate. His eyebrows shot up, and he handled the coin delicately, studying it for several minutes before nodding in quiet appreciation. He explained that he'd never seen an error like this on a 1988 dime before, but that the doubling looked genuine, not mechanical doubling or damage. Word spread from there, and slowly other collectors began checking their 1988 dimes more closely. Over the next few years, only a handful of other examples surfaced, each showing similar doubling, though with slight variations in strength. Grading services confirmed them as legitimate double die errors, an incredibly rare occurrence for dimes of that period. Collectors began to recognize just how scarce and intriguing these coins really were. While the Roosevelt series has its share of minor varieties, the 1988 double die quickly distinguished itself by the sharpness of its doubling and the minuscule number of known survivors. It seemed likely that the error came from just one defective die, which was caught and replaced soon after the flawed coins began striking. At first, the market for these coins was subdued, as error dimes generally took a backseat to their more famous penny and quarter cousins. Early sales were modest, with prices hovering in the low thousands. But as the years passed, their scarcity became harder to ignore. Error specialists began competing for the best examples, driving up prices at auctions. Each discovery only fueled more demand, as collectors and investors alike realized just how few high-quality pieces were out there. By the early 2010s, the 1988 double die dime was firmly established as one of the rarest modern errors. Its appeal lay in its quiet subtlety, its capacity to hide unnoticed for decades in ordinary circulation, and its astonishing scarcity once collectors began to take notice. What had seemed like just another clad dime became a small treasure, a story of oversight, luck, and keen eyes. The error itself tells its story with every detail. On the obverse, Liberty and the motto "In God We Trust" show crisp doubling at the edges, almost like a ghost image just offset from the main lettering. On the reverse, the torch and its surrounding branches exhibit faint doubling as well, though less dramatic. Each coin shows slight variations, suggesting that as the flawed die continued to strike, its deterioration affected later strikes differently. Then came an unexpected twist. In 2019, a particularly striking example appeared in a high-end auction, certified in near-pristine condition with doubling stronger than previously documented. Experts debated whether this represented a slightly earlier strike from the same defective die or possibly an entirely different die with similar flaws. Either way, it sparked renewed excitement in the numismatic community and a fresh wave of searches through 1988 rolls. Collectors today continue to prize the coin not just for its rarity, but for its quiet defiance of the mint's quality control at a time when errors were supposed to be all but impossible. Every example tells the same story. A dime that was never meant to exist, yet somehow did, waiting years for the right pair of eyes to recognize it. And now, with only a tiny number of verified examples known and even fewer in high grades, the 1988 double die dime stands as one of the most elusive and valuable Roosevelt dimes struck after silver was removed from circulation. At auction today, depending on condition and strength of doubling, these remarkable little coins fetch anywhere between $33,000 and as much as $110,000. A testament to the value hidden in the smallest of mistakes. In 2006, the U.S. Mint maintained its unrelenting rhythm, striking billions of coins as it had for decades. Dimes rolled off the presses in Philadelphia and Denver, bearing the familiar face of Franklin D. Roosevelt and the timeless reverse of the torch flanked by branches. By this point in history, the minting process was nearly perfected, the chance of any error escaping into circulation seemingly minuscule. Modern technology had reduced mistakes to an occasional curiosity, quickly caught and corrected before reaching the public. Yet even the most precise machinery is vulnerable to human oversight and wear, and in 2006 that vulnerability quietly revealed itself through an unassuming Roosevelt dime. That year, millions of Americans carried 2006 dimes in their pockets, dropped them into vending machines, and counted them into cash drawers without a thought. There was nothing about the year or the coin to suggest anything remarkable. And for a long time, nothing seemed remarkable at all. But hidden among those countless coins were a few that bore something subtle, something so well hidden it would take the patience and eyes of a collector to uncover. One of those collectors was Martin Hayes, an experienced hobbyist who had been combing through coins for nearly 2 decades. By 2008, he had developed an almost instinctive feel for errors and varieties, able to sense when something about a coin didn't feel quite right. One night, sorting through several boxes of dimes he'd picked up from his bank, he found himself pausing over a coin he almost passed by. It looked just like the others at first glance, but when the light hit it from an angle, he noticed something strange about the obverse. He held it up closer, adjusting the magnifying lens he kept on his desk. What he saw then quickened his breath. Faint yet clear doubling on the motto "I in God we trust" and the word liberty. It wasn't mechanical doubling, the kind caused by die bounce or movement after the strike, but true double die doubling, sharp and well-defined. His heart raced as he studied it further. The date too showed slight evidence of doubling, though less prominent. He set the coin aside, refusing to get carried away too quickly. Mistakes happen even to seasoned collectors. Yet the more he compared the dime to others, the more convinced he became. That night he barely slept, instead poring through reference books and images of other double dies, looking for a match. But nothing quite like this was documented. Weeks later, he sent the coin to a grading service for authentication. The wait was agonizing. Finally, when the coin returned, slabbed and labeled as a 2006 Roosevelt dime with a verified double die obverse, his suspicions were confirmed. The sense of triumph was matched only by a deeper curiosity. How had this error gone unnoticed? He began sharing images of his find on collector forums, sparking debates and excitement. Other collectors, intrigued, dug into their own stashes of 2006 dimes, hoping to find more. Over time, a handful of additional examples were reported, each showing similar but slightly varied doubling. It became clear that a single defective die at one of the mints had produced a small number of flawed coins before being pulled from production. At first, the market for these error dimes was modest. Modern errors often took years to gain attention, and few people at the time thought much of a minor double die on a clad Roosevelt dime. Early sales stayed in the low thousands, bought mostly by specialists and error collectors. But as more people realized how few high-grade examples existed, demand began to grow. By 2012, prices started to climb. Auction houses began listing them as notable modern errors, describing the doubling in detail and emphasizing their rarity. Each certified example that surfaced seemed to bring out more competitive bidders, and prices rose further still. Collectors who once dismissed the 2006 double die dime as a minor curiosity began to understand its significance. A rare flaw in an era that was supposed to produce flawless coins. The doubling itself remains one of the most intriguing aspects of the error. On the obverse, the letters of "I in God we trust" appear shadowed by faint, secondary impressions just offset from the main design. Liberty shows similar doubling, most visible along the vertical strokes of the letters. Even the date exhibits the effect under close magnification, though it is more subtle. The reverse, however, shows no doubling at all, confirming that only the obverse die was flawed. Then, in 2017, an unexpected twist deepened the mystery. A collector in California submitted an example to a grading service that showed doubling even stronger than previously recorded. Some experts wondered if this meant a second flawed die had been involved, or if the early strikes from the known defective die simply had a more pronounced effect. The discovery reignited interest, and searches for additional specimens increased. Collectors who had been quietly holding onto their examples began to bring them to market, where they fetched increasingly impressive prices. The scarcity of high-grade pieces, coupled with the strong doubling on some of the earliest strikes, made the coin a must-have for Roosevelt series enthusiasts and error specialists alike. Today, the 2006 double die dime has earned a respected place among modern errors, not because it was obvious or spectacular at first glance, but because of the quiet persistence of those who uncovered its story. From its unnoticed escape from the mint to the patient work of collectors who recognized its value, the coin represents a fascinating chapter in the ongoing saga of U.S. coinage. And for those who hold one of these elusive coins today, its worth has become clear. Depending on condition and the strength of doubling, certified examples of the 2006 double-die Roosevelt dime now command between $28,000 and as much as $98,000 at auction. A remarkable price for a tiny piece of copper-nickel clad history that once passed through countless hands without a second thought.